always hard to start off a conference and kick us off, but the way you get yourself up early in the morning, they put the fun stuff where we get to talk about hip hop and politics, and we really have some amazing legends and some really trailblazers and people I've been watching for years. So with that, hi, I'm Cameron Trimble, Howard University, HU. Howard University, class of 2003. This is my 20th anniversary coming up this year. It feels good to see Blackburn rejuvenated and revitalized. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Hip Politics, mobilizing the political power of hip hop, and a bunch of other stuff. But this is not about me. This is about, we're really about to have a really interesting conversation about the intersection of hip hop as not just artists, but as a culture in politics in this 50th, as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of hip hop. So without further ado, let me bring up our esteemed panelists. First, I would like to bring to the stage Professor Griff. Professor Griff is a rapper, spoken word artist, lecturer, and you will obviously know him as a former member of the iconic and legendary rap group Public Enemy. For those that don't know, Professor Griff is also known as the Minister of Information. He's continued his vigilance by providing information to the masses as a published author through music, spoken word, and lectures. And most recently in 2020, Professor Griff was presented with a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Give another hand for Professor Griff. Next up, we have a man that I've had a chance to work with his organization and have seen how they have grown and really trailblazed, and I'm definitely riding their coattails and following along their lead at the Hip Hop Caucus. I have Reverend Yearwood. He's the president, founder of the Hip Hop Caucus. Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr. Yes, give him his applause. Reverend Lennox Yearwood Jr. is the president and CEO of Hip Hop Caucus, a minister, community activist, and a U.S. Air Force veteran. The nonprofit, nonpartisan Hip Hop Caucus is a multi-issue organization focusing on addressing core issues impacting the underserved and vulnerable communities, and with programs and campaigns that support solution-driven community organizing led by today's young leaders. Another hand for Reverend Yearwood. And last up, we have Icon Living. I don't know if anybody has checked in on their title, Spotify this morning, the Love album. She's featured on the hottest track there. But we have a Miss Dawn Richards. Please welcome to the stage, Miss Dawn Richards. In a previous life, you may know her as a member of Danny D. Kane, Dirty Money, on the Bad Boy, but she is also a prolific solo artist, most recently dropping albums in 2022 and 2021, Pigments and Second Line. Please check those out and stream them. But she is here also in her capacity as the Director of Artist Relations for Hip Hop Caucus. Dawn has really been instrumental and one of those folks that is showing that when you get a platform and you can tour the world, tour the country, get so many fans, but how do you then redirect that energy for kind of community development and really dive in on some of those issues that you care about? So please give another round of applause for Dawn Richards. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Oh, here's another thing. Hello, hello. Hello.
Yeah, it works.
I can see if that.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Okay, we're good. We're live and direct. I'm going to start off with an easy one. We're celebrating Hip Hop 50 this year. And something I come from the campaign and political background, it's something we say of 50-year-olds is that they're high propensity voters. And I think now hip hop in its 50th year is now matured as a culture, not just artists, but as a culture and as relevance to where now it is a high propensity voter itself. As we transition into the next 50 years of hip hop, Where do you see the evolution of, and all of you have throughout your careers, have done so much to involve community, whether it's on political change, social change, utilize your voices, your platforms, to really drive that community change and awareness. Where do you see the evolution of hip-hop as a culture as it relates to its political and social activism?
I think Queen Latifah said ladies first. So you want to take that?
I can take it. Thank you. I think with where we are now in hip-hop, you're seeing an evolution of the concept of hip-hop generationally, right? It's broadened. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and they were speaking about the lifestyle of hip-hop and how now we've evolved into multi-genres, and the concept of the story of hip-hop has changed along with the way in which music and art and culture is being formed through our youth. You also see the voice changing, right? And I think it'll happen with social media. It'll happen with Generation Z. You'll start to see us believe in authenticity, in message, in narrative, owning narrative. And I think this time is crucial for us to recognize the change of hip-hop and how we vocalize how to be in the space. I love that this era of artists are speaking about things that they feel are real to them and things that are false. And with social media bringing a false narrative very much present, hip-hop will evolve with this youth, and they'll have a stand on it the way in which I'm watching the youth do it. I know for me, when I went through what I went through, it was imperative that me as an artist take initiative and not believe the hype, but learn and then come out in that way. I've seen a lot of artists do the same, and I think hip-hop is becoming that young artist who are saying we're not going to believe anything, we're going to research it and build these things ourselves, like politicking. To me, what these two young women have done, that's a form of what the evolution of hip-hop is turning into, is us taking our own narrative and initiative.
Definitely taking our own narrative.
First of all, let me just say thank you very much for honoring me, just inviting me, just opening up the door for me to come sit on this panel. So thank you very much, and definitely thank the people for showing up, not just showing up, but having some interest and showing up with your energy. And definitely thank Politic, and I have to thank Guy from Gas Tactical, my man's in them, and the entire family. Thank you very much. But let me just correct one thing. When you introduced me, you said I was a rapper. I don't know what playbook you got that one from. I'm 63 years old. When we started out, there was no such thing as rappers. We were MCs. We was a master of ceremonies. So I think just the outstart of having a conversation about hip-hop, we need to get some basic fundamental stuff straight first. Can we do that just for a second? Okay, cool. Is there a difference between hip-hop and rap? Yes, it is. So you look at the umbrella, which is hip-hop. Under hip-hop, we have the four fundamentals elements of hip-hop. And I'm testing the audience early this morning, and they are what? Somebody show me your hands. Yes, yes? Graffiti, and who else? Breakdancing, come on, I need two more. DJing, one more. Okay, no, one more. Yes, MCing, thank you. See, that's what we're trying to correct. Bro, we got you, though. Looking like Kanye West back there, we got you. The fifth element of hip-hop is the synthesizing the four fundamental elements, which is knowledge itself. We have to put that in place first before we begin to have this discussion. Then someone from politicking is going to explain to us what is politics. Well, can someone explain that? What is politics? See, because if we're going to demystify it, then let's demystify it. Then what is politics? Come on, talk black to me, somebody, anybody. Everybody say ho, somebody say something. Let's do that, and then you can throw it back to me.
I would say politics is the ability to move people or move ideas
Right.
to one side or another.
Okay.
To one side or another.
So let me vet you back off of that. Politics, could we say, is the science of governing people, all right? Can hip-hop do that? So this whole intersection, where does it intersect? And as our beautiful sister here said, the artists of today, so moving beyond 50 years, we have to start studying how do we get to this 50-year mark, and who are those individuals that moved hip-hop politically? All right? So we have to begin to have that conversation with the younger people that's in the audience, because if we look at hip-hop, if we look at rap today, because we're not seeing hip-hop. Hip-hop is higher infinite power healing our people. Higher infinite power healing our people. If we're not seeing hip-hop today, and we just see one element of hip-hop, which is rap, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, because now someone else is coming along and redefining who we are in a culture that's ours. And guess what they're doing? They're politicizing it. And it's working against us. And I feel Mr. Yearwood over there, his wheels are turning right now. He's going to come behind me with something very profound. But we have to begin to have those discussions. Moving beyond the 50 years, it should be a lot different from the last 50 years. Would you all agree? It has to be different. We have to take control of our culture and move our culture forward. Thank you.
Well, first, it's always an honor to be back at my alma here at Howard University. Yes, indeed. HU, you know.
You know.
And it's exciting for me personally to be doing this work, to be on stage here with the beautiful, talented, powerful Dawn Richard, and most definitely who's from my home state of Louisiana. She's from New Orleans, I'm from Shreveport, but you know, it's the same. We from the boot, so all from the same place. And for me, someone who I admire so much, Professor Griff, who has just been a catalyst. Let me just finish what he was saying. Clearly, politics is a science. That's the reason why we have political scientists. And it's the study of how people come together to figure out democracy and how they engage to put forth their platforms and to shape policy. Because either you shape policy or policy shapes you. And so that is the core elements of that. And some folks do it better than others. And so the idea for us in hip hop is then how do we use our cultural expression to shape our political experience? How do we use this thing that's been around now for 50 years? How do we use hip hop that was created 5 years after the death of Dr. Martin Luther King, that was created after the bombing in Montgomery, that was created after many things, that was created alongside the creation of the Black Panther Party and many other liberation groups of the day. It's important to know that hip-hop was created from politics. It is the Bronx Causeway that was built by Bob Moses, or Robert Moses, the highway baron, and literally designed to create a sacrifice zone of the Bronx. And literally saying that those people aren't worth even us building highways so they can live, but will be highways that will cause asthma and cancer and emphysema. And we're going to build a highway to go over them, which will also signal to banks that their property is worth nothing. We will, in essence, create redlining. And in that effect of that policy, from redlining of highways, of creating poverty, in that is the creation of hip hop. It is in that moment where we, as a people who are fighting to echo and make sure people hear our liberation, it is in those moments when we're just trying to describe the knee on our neck or the foot on our back or the ability for them to be the last one hired and the first one fired, to want to put the pollution in our community that we now know that 68% of Black people live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant, causing us asthma and emphysema and bronchitis and cancer, that they understand that willingly. And so once you understand that the country you're supposed to pledge your allegiance to is also willing to kill you and put you in a sacrifice zone, you are now confronted with this kind of bipolar democracy of what it means to be a citizen of these United States here on Turtle Island. That's what we're confronted with. And if it had just stopped there in 73 and gotten better over the past 50 years, but we have really moved from hip-hop being created in a space of equality to now in the 21st century at 2023, we're now fighting not only for equality, but for existence. So our lives have now gotten worse. And so the question for us then is that the idea of the musician, the artist, the MC, is that they have the ability to see the future. They have the ability to see the impossible. It has been quoted that the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And so in that space, the question is, in this moment, we are facing a revolution for our lives. We are literally dying in our schools. We are literally dying in our hospitals. We are literally dying in our grocery stores. We are being hunted down in dollar stores and in supermarkets. We are being subjected to the worst health care and the worst schools, and we are in these positions. So the question for hip-hop is that, can we rise to the occasion? When you see your people dying, and this ain't just for hip-hop, it's for Howard and for Hampton and for black colleges and for all of us. When you see even on the campus, the flood lines are rising on the ACE UC campus. When it's no longer just New Orleans and Katrina, but when it's now Clark, Atlanta, and Morehouse and Spelman. What do you do when it's no longer even black or white? We got a black mayor in Atlanta who wants to fight to create Cop City, and you got black folks in high places happy to be there. That's hip-hop's challenge now. That's our challenge now. That how do we create a space for liberation? How do we continue to sing the freedom songs down by the riverside? That means nothing about Jesus, but all about freedom. How does hip-hop, or really any cultural form we want to find, help us from dying, help us from being exterminated, help us from facing genocide? That's the role of the artists, because they have the ability to not get caught in the weeds, but to speak life and truth. And the next 50 years, with the climate crisis, my heart breaks today, knowing what was done in Libya, knowing what was done to destabilize that beautiful African country, and to see on the news 10,000 Africans washed away in Morocco. And many of us on this campus don't even understanding that that's going on in Africa, or being limited for migration to the UK, or even they're putting up spikes in the river around Texas to kill our brown brothers and sisters and non-binary cousins. That's the role of hip-hop now. So I hope our conversation is not about lyrics, or not about what, God bless every artist who's out there doing their career to make their music, but literally about using our culture to save our lives. That's what this moment requires of us right now.
Thank you. Amen. Reverend, you said something there that I'm sorry, I've just been taking some notes that really spoke to me, and I would love for Dawn and the professor to respond to. You said that one of the roles of an artist is to make the revolution irresistible.
Right.
I love that line. And I think through the music, and the movement and the culture, we can see that the role of the artist in a lot of ways is, to your point, is to make the revolution irresistible, but they make so many other things look irresistible, the reason why we follow artists and all that they do. In seeing two different generations of the hip-hop culture here sitting next to me, I'd like for you both, if Dawn, in your role as artist relations, both being a successful global artist and now translating that not only experience but that credibility to other artists to make the next revolution, to make voting to make why we even need to be paying attention if most people feel that most parties don't care, that as the Reverend laid out, so many different things, the bipolarness of our democracy. And then also for the professor, how you are literally known as the Minister of Information. In your music, and you're probably part of one of the most iconic groups that really kick-started. That was the first time as a kid I had ever heard the revolution seem irresistible. Can you both speak to, from in your respective roles now and where you've been in your career, the roles and responsibilities of an artist to make civic engagement irresistible, to make the revolution irresistible? What you see and why, and how do we continue to do that, not just in the past, but how do we continue to do that moving forward?
I know working with the caucus and even having my own personal experience, I think they both speak to the truth of it. We have to arm ourselves with education. I think artists have lost the concept of education and knowledge. We're believing the first things that we see, and the laziness of not understanding our culture and what's going on in our own communities is present, it's real. And what has been the journey of me working with the caucus is to bridge the gap between what is laziness, right, getting on social media and saying this is fact, and actually going into our own communities and telling them that they have to arm themselves with education, giving them the information, because so much of the information that's laid out to us is false. They're only giving us half of it, or completely incorrect information, because that's how they keep us weak. That's how they keep us mobilized into the wrong places, right? For me, being able to go into these grassroots communities, DIY, talking to my own people and telling them what it is, and then using my platforms to be able to educate has been the strongest opportunity I could possibly have. When I'm on the stage, every time I move, that message being honest, being real, our narrative being told by our own stories is what's going to save artists. Our stories are the ways in which we save our community. Artists need to know that. When I speak of evolution, I'm talking about the reality that as we watch hip-hop, having women talk about the reality of what hip-hop was to them is the growth, right? Hip-hop wasn't all flowers for women, right? The caucus took a chance to interview Dee Barnes, right, and talk about what that was with Dr. Dre, being unafraid and fearless to tell the positive and the negative of hip-hop. We've got to tell our stories, and being able to invest in ourselves to tell those stories, to me, is what's going to make this artist's role more powerful. Because right now, we're right in a space where they want us to be, but there is a beautiful group of people realizing the hype is not real. And they're choosing to develop platforms, opportunities, businesses that point to that if we don't have this education, if we don't use this platform correctly, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose our story when there's opportunity for our wealth. There's opportunity for growth here. We are in a dire time. And if it is not acknowledged as artists, we will lose it. And I think that there is a hub. I have to believe, I have to hope, because I put myself in this environment to do so. I have to hope we are recognizing that. And when I say that, when I spoke to the young ladies at Politicking, them presenting this is the beginning of that. There are investors and young business startups. There are kids who are realizing the dire need we're in. The climate crisis, the fact that we are real estate, mentioning that. We are seeing that there are loopholes and gaps that are not being fed to us, and that we have to find our own information. So I think for artists right now, what I'm learning is, if I don't, like me, I said, okay, it's cute to be a musician, but how is it to be in a director role and to learn and then give back and uplift? That's way more powerful. I think more artists saying, okay, this design doesn't feel right, I'm gonna build my own Mecca. Learn this Mecca, put people in who teach the story, and then teach it to others, is how we win as musicians and artists. And if we show that in a way that works like this, I think we're in for a beautiful time for artists, but the shift has to happen now. We are way behind. And the more in which we have these conversations, and we are with people who have done it, like Professor Griffin Rev, who have built it, and they are telling us, okay, you're cute, but let me give you some information, and then I'm going to help you facilitate it, is how we win.
Wow. This Let's give her a round of applause. That was, yeah. I think if I can just answer that question, the whole idea of the revolution being irresistible is it's a very deep insight on what the Rev gave us, simply because this period of time in black music, this period of time after coming off of what I saw the other night at the VMAs, this period of time reminds me of the time that gave birth to Public Enemy. And it's almost like, who knew of anything about the idea of revolution in music? Who was doing it? Was those artists at that particular time that was sporting the fat, dookie, gold, fake gold chains, that was turning in neck greens? How many people remember that period of time? Okay, so only like 4 people just remember that. that this time reminds me of that time, which gave birth to a group like Public Enemy. We sat back and we heard all the way from the Bronx, because no one really cared about Long Island until they discovered that Public Enemy, Rakim, De La Soul, LONS, Leaders of the New School, Busta Rhymes, EPMD, I could go on and on of all of the groups that came from Long Island. But the other boroughs didn't really care about Long Island until we had the roar out of Long Island. But when we talk about the idea of this revolution, all right, who knew? Like, who knows now that an artist, the artist that you speak of, who's talking revolution? Revolution is complete, constructive, conscious, cosmic change. Inside of the word revolution is the word meaning to bind back to or to do over. All right, so the whole idea of re-evolving is very important. When you're talking about revolution, we need change. What is actually changing? What is rap, not hip hop, but what is rap changing on the political spectrum? All right, can we name some of those particular artists that stand out? Young people might say, a few young people right here, who y'all might say that's speaking politically or consciously? Kendrick. So we might say Kendrick. The next generation coming up under me might say who? Okay, so there's some other artists. What female rap groups that are out speaking to women speaking to women in women's circles? So if we're talking culturally, we're talking revolution, someone has to speak to a revolution. There has to be it has to be a change, it has to be movement. What movements are coming from young people today? What's the theme song? What was the theme song when Black Lives Matter were doing their thing in the streets, protesting? What was the theme song? I'm throwing this out there.
Kendrick Lamar, We Gonna Be All Right.
Okay, We Gonna Be All Right. All right, which is very soothing and it's cool, and it moved that generation. So back in the day, we can honestly say the song that moved Public Enemy to do what we did was what song? Anybody remember? Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, when they said, "Don't push me, cause."
Close to the.
Loosen up the tie, bro. Come on. If we can't recite stuff like that today, that's going to move young people, then what are we doing? You understand what I'm saying? So I can roll my spirit back and say it was Gil Scott-Heron that said what? The revolution will not be televised. It was the last poets that stood on the corner that said what? All the other things that we've pulled from to put in our songs. So what did Public Enemy do? Like hip hop did, we took a gigantic barrel and we put everything in there to make this gigantic gumbo. No pun intended, I'm just saying. We made a gigantic gumbo and we put that in the music. And then we revolutionized our lyrics and our music. Chuck D says our rap songs coming from MCs, we want to make songs that black women cannot dance to. And I'm like, why are you saying that? We want people to, to groove. You understand what I'm saying? He says, no, I want people to listen. We said, okay, then we need to put some profound statements in there so that they will listen, so we can politicize people. We can point people to colleges and universities and black organizations so we can grow as a people, because if the people grow, we will grow. And out of that garden because we were definitely warriors in a garden. Isn't it better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war? Come on, talk to me. Am I right or wrong? So out of that garden, it would produce other MCs and other groups. And guess what happened? Other groups that was our peers said, wait a minute, I got to say something black. I got to say something conscious. So we took off the gold, fake gold chains, and we started putting on African medallions. We started being a lot more conscious. We started speaking about things. And it was the ripple effect. We threw the conscious revolutionary pebble in the pond, and it grew 7 generations. So then when we look at Africa, we saw it bubbling under. We started hearing the lyrics changing. We started seeing the dress changing. You understand what I'm saying? So let me just say this. We were hip-hop before hip-hop was hip-hop. We were doing hip-hop before hip-hop was hip-hop. The term hip-hop came a lot later on. We were already in the streets doing it because the conditions that produced something called hip-hop, the Rev spoke to it. It was already there in the Bronx. And we just expressed it in the way we expressed it on Long Island. The term, the idea of public enemy was pulled from the Constitution. We said we was enemy of the public simply because they wrote us in as 3/5 of a human being. I said, no, we're the whole human being. And all the other human beings came from black people. So when we put that out front and our lyrics and what we did on stage spoke to it, we had to be about the word. Do you understand what I'm saying? We had to walk the walk and talk the talk. So we didn't come on stage with dancers. We came on stage with soldiers with license plates that said S1W carrying Uzi machine guns because we needed to get your attention. Do you understand what I'm saying? We came on with a certain discipline. Well, I can't speak for Flav. I'm just saying.
Show up, who they see you support. I will give a shout out to a lot of young artists. We have the Rhapsodies, the J. Cole's, the Kendrick Lamars, but I can tell a personal story. I worked in the White House, Biden's White House. I was the director of digital engagement, and it was the day the Floyd family was there to talk about the Floyd Policing Act. And I'm walking down the hall with 2 of my colleagues. This was early COVID days, so everybody didn't have a vaccine, so it's a little more empty. And we're headed to this meeting, this briefing, before they go and meet with the president and VP. And sitting it by himself in a room was one of the biggest rappers in the world, Lil Baby. He didn't bring his entourage, didn't bring any fanfare, him and a security guard, and he was there just as support. And I realized, and we got to talk to him about 15 minutes, and if you remember that time, pictures came out of him meeting with the VP. That was unscheduled. And just by him standing next to the Floyd family, now you got Esquire, now you got XXL, you got all these Vanity Fair and Rolling Stone, all these other pop culture sites reporting on the Floyd family, reporting on the politics. And he literally said, I don't want to say a word, but his presence is there. Now, I can't speak to all of his music and everything he does, but understanding that I want you all to anyone to speak to the information and education and opportunity that hip-hop needs to not only be educated on itself, on why voting is important, why we continue to need to show up, but how they then can, whether it's through their music, through their support, or through other ways, how you see that hip-hop can then take the education they get in and give that education and information back out to why we do need to show up, especially going into such a huge election year next year.
Yeah, let me unpack that. That's a great thing. I want to just unpack something that Professor Griff said before we get this to how artists impact, obviously, elections and the political process. I think one thing Professor Griff said that was very important that he said is that he said that when they were Public Enemy, they were looking outside to see where to put people in institutions. And they were looking at the landscape. And me looking back at that time, there were things that were happening down at Virginia Beach. There were things that were going on with Amadou Diallo. There were many, many things that were happening at that time. And the reason why that's important is because what I believe is artists, while they can see the bigger picture and the vision, the one thing that's important, though, is that artists also follow movements. meaning that when the movement is strong, the music is strong. But when the movement is weak, the music is weak. So when you look on the VMAs and you look at the artists who are there, what they're also showing to you is that the movement right now is weak because artists follow suit. So when you remember Little Baby is a good example, Little Baby at that time was the movement for Black Lives. And so he and many other artists, felt compelled to Beyonce at the Super Bowl. They were so moved by the movement at that time, they were then following the footsteps of the people. This is very important because I think that a lot of times we are looking to artists, but artists are looking to you. So Professor Grove says that at that time, him and Shakti and others, they're creating not just in themselves, but they're creating with, they're seeing and they're around a lot of artists. That's important because what we need to have is a combination. What we call at Hip Hop Caucus is when you take an artist and an activist and you put together, you have an artivist. And you need to have artivism in which those artists can be engaged. The thing about to the political process now, this is the thing. So I've been involved with every hip hop political campaign since the beginning, since Rap the Vote with Queen Latifah, co-created Vote or Die with Diddy, was the director of grassroots engagements for the hip hop summits. Now, as president of Hip Hop Caucus, we have the longest, most successful running voting campaign through Respect My Vote that engages for those who are returning citizens or formerly incarcerated people and those in our communities. Big shout out to DTLR and folks like Radio One who partnered with us to do bus tours and different things in that aspect. So there's a whole collaboration there. The thing that's needed though is this. Artists have to be true to themselves. Because if you're asking an artist to use their brand for something that they don't believe in, it shows. And too many times, too many politicians are asking for artists to stand with them and go through a lot of the things, and you see it feels awkward. It doesn't feel right. It just feels like, man, I don't know why that doesn't look right. It doesn't feel genuine. What's needed now is before we get to the voting process, which is critical, and we should be voting on this repeat. Let me just also say that I was mentored. I heard some Deltas in here. So I was mentored by Dr. Dorothy Irene Height. That was my mentor. So shout out to the Deltas leave or something? Oh, okay. I already said it. Y'all roll out. You know. So I want to say, so I just want to say that in the voting process, the thing that's critical is this. We have to understand how policy works and what policies that we're fighting for. We think we're voting for a person as a politician, but we're actually voting for policy. And too many people are caught up on the personality and missing the policy. So that when we're dealing with food deserts or food scarcity, or we're dealing with situations with over policing, or you're dealing with issues of environmental justice, or you're dealing with issues of poverty. I heard earlier about real estate and wealth development. These are all policies. So the first thing we have to do for artists is that they need to first have conversations about policies. Then we can move to the conversation about who we're voting for. The problem is that sometimes the politicians don't match the policies, and it creates a little bit of a schism.
I think to even go deeper, like the speaking of the VMAs, before we can go there, we need a movement of culture to support
Facts.
the network. We need black networks,
Yes.
people who, because it's, get into it, MTV is Viacom, which means most of the things you're watching that artists are asked to perform are run by white companies. So they're controlling the narrative, and that's not just television, that's the stages you watch, like Live Nation, which is the concerts you go to. So even though the big artists like the Beyoncés you love, the people that are behind the concert that's putting it on is getting that large chunk of percentage, which is again a white narrative. So before we can even go and have that discussion, the reason where we need a movement like Public Enemy, they went to the outreach, right? They created something in outreach to their own community. We need us controlling our own networks, the visual. We need us controlling the narrative of the concert, so that when we're in these spaces, we're having those conversations, those dialogues are being had, and we are educating ourselves on what content is coming out, what narrative is being said, because it's a larger thing, right? Everything you're watching isn't our narrative. It's controlled. So they're putting those people on there. They're making those artists. They're not putting the performance you like. They're putting the performance they know got the song "I Like to Be a Hoe," and that's the music. That's the songs we're seeing,
Exactly.
right? They're doing that on purpose. So we as a community need to, number one, get our own network, a television where it shows politics, where it shows politicking, where it has Professor Griffin Rev speaking on our commercials, where our commercial bumps, our animated video, everything is curated for our narrative. And then when we turn on our radio station, we actually have a radio station, right? Not the radio station that's run by, again, that narrative, right? So everything we're listening to is being fed to us for our narrative to be erased. So before we can even get to voting, we have to get power in our own voice and narrative to be able to create a place where we can get that information and education.
Thank you. We do need we do need more networks, both audio, visual.
Exactly.
And then I love what's happening online. I think online in the digital and social media space, and of course, like in apps like politicking that are owned by us and for us. I want to open it up to the audience for a couple questions before we wrap the panel. If you could, I believe in introducing yourself, so just give us your name before you give your question.
How y'all doing? My name's Anthony. I do agree with you where I do feel like a lot of artists, especially in the realm of hip hop, that artists need to stay true to themselves. So the question that I wanted to ask all of you, and I'm a fan by the way, how do we get today's popular rappers involved in the importance of politics, knowing that the streets still govern rap?
Well, I think the Reverend said it, but all three of us said it, but the idea of having the conversation, and it needs to be in an environment where they feel safe and comfortable about being very realistic and very transparent. The idea of having the conversation about voting. Why didn't someone pull P. Diddy aside and said, the only two options you're giving us are vote and die? And no one said anything. Well, I said something, but I'm just saying. No one pulled him aside and said, bro, listen, we have more options than that. Why don't you push the pause button on that and educate young people about the process in which I think Wynn and Jordan talked about in the introduction, the process of voting, getting them to understand what the vote means. The Electoral College, what is that? Young rappers coming up today don't have a clue what these things are. So we need to have the conversation. You understand what I'm saying? A lot of times when not here, but when I go to different conventions and different places, I say, well, why aren't they here? So we can have a conversation with them, a grown-up conversation. Do you understand what I'm saying? A lot of times on the artist end, all it is the gig, they get it from their manager, the limousine door opens, they show them to sound check, go back to the hotel, go do the gig, show up, here's the mic, do your thing, limousine door opens up again, the after party, bag a couple of chicks, go to the hotel, then it's the next city. When do they ever have the conversation? When we say, listen, let's press the pause button, can we just talk? Why can't a Professor Griff talk to a little baby? Who's blocking that? I mean, my phone number is out there. Y'all got my number? 678-557-2919. 678-557-2919. Little baby can call me. We can talk. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think, and not to be too wordy, I think that if we got the older MCs, which are elders, and there's a difference between older and elder, because some of them was old anyway. If we got the elders that are in hip hop that are still living in the room with the younger MCs, I think we'll have a different outcome at the VMAs. Even if they control it or not, we'll have a different outcome. Because guess who they're accountable to? Thank you. And that's real.
No, that's real. I just want to say, I think the institutions are important. Dawn Richard is the Artist Relations Director. I was going to give her an extra title right now on stage. She's like, okay, I'll take all that. I'll take all that. And in that role, Hip Hop Caucus, I think it's important for institutions. I'm a big believer in institutions. Obviously, I went to Howard. Hip Hop Caucus was started here on Howard's campus 19 years ago this week. And so I think it was in response, Professor Griff was saying about what's more than vote or die. Obviously, we need a Hip Hop Caucus. So I do think that we need to have institutions. When we need to support our institutions, I think that's important. I think that we this is my shout out to the other civil rights organizations, I think, and other members of Congress. There's a tendency that they also just fall in line to who they think is hot. And so I do think that we have to be much more, sophisticated, and that we're pulling in not only artists who are about liberation for our people and giving them a platform at our conferences, at our schools. A couple weeks from now will be homecoming, at our homecomings. I think that's important. But also I think that we have to even broaden that, because there are artists who are clearly outside of America. There are artists who are in Brazil and on the continent. There's artists all over this world who are using the culture of hip hop in powerful ways. So I think that that's one way, but I would say that for us as an organization, we are trying to do that. I would just say it's also important that, something that Dawn mentioned also, please know that there are people and corporations whose business plan means a death sentence for our communities.
Amen.
Like literally, that's what they're trying to do. So they want to water down our message. We got to make sure and lift up the artists who can bring that forward.
Wow. Lift up the artists that bring that forward. If those artists like myself are never invited, let me just press the pause button. Can we name a conscious MC today? Rapper? J. Cole. Then we should see J. Cole in these spaces. Then how come we don't?
Well, I would even go further. There are artists like Immortal Technique. There's different levels to that.
They're just building their own in their own silos. They're doing within their own spaces in their own way.
Okay, then let's make a concerted effort to make sure the ones that young people look up to as positive and conscious are in those spaces then.
Yeah.
And to that point, Dawn, given that this role, I don't know if this role has ever existed before with Hip Hop Caucus, but knowing a person, again, of your background background and success, because I think that is important. People recognize, like, people follow people who they want to be like, or they recognize, hey, you've walked through my shoes. Digging into that question of how we really get artists to be comfortable and to reflect and really use that music, like, what do you plan to do in this role with, again, an iconic organization like Hip Hop Caucus that has longevity in the community and given your background, I think I'm so proud that that you're there in that role to translate. How do you, maybe just one or two things that you think that can be done, not only by Hip Hop Caucus, but anybody, to make sure that artists are actually engaged and reflected in the music?
Yeah, the first thing is start the conversation. Like we're saying, like have the dialogue and create. You said it, Professor Griffin, it's real. Make them feel they have a safe space to do it. Because I'm gonna be honest, these kids don't trust none of this. They don't trust the government, they don't trust the elders, they don't trust anyone. And because of it, they're hurting themselves because they don't realize the importance of the information. So for me, the first role is to create the space for them to have the conversation and the dialogue, no matter where they choose to be in the conversation of it. The second is then invest in the platform, invest in the opportunities to give them platforms to shine. And shine in the correct ways, right? Because they don't even know what that concept is. I've been on major labels. Their narrative is built for us to be a certain thing. They want us to fit in that. And if you don't fit in that, they disregard you. So the second step is to invest in the artist in any way in which they feel their messaging is important. For me, I went through climate change, a crisis. I saw it. And then it wasn't because someone told me, I felt it. So to be an example and say, okay, look, you are in an environment where they are building it to hurt you. These are the ways in which you can shift it. I think I am the example of what the new age artist will look like, where we will not only be musicians, but entrepreneurs, gatekeepers to new avenues in the way in which artists present themselves to the world. I mean, we have Professor Griff as an example. Rev is the Griff of what they were doing long before. But I think this new age with technology is going to cause for some really creative ways and innovative ways in which you see artists show up in these spaces, using TikTok and Instagram to politically use their voices. And they may not be big now, but oh wait, they're big in their silos. They're big in their numbers. There are TikTok advocates, advocates who are like fighting the fight within their spaces. There are young illustrators out there doing what they need to do. I am the movement of that. I am those kids who are saying we're going to put our money where our mouth is.
Right. And I think that real quick, I think we need to be very mindful and begin to use what Stevie Wonder called our inner vision to look forward, to see what we're up against culturally and politically. Because how many people remember the two incidents that happened over the last year? The influencer showed up at, what park was that in New York? Columbia Square? No? Columbus Circle?
He was in the middle of,
Yeah, he showed up, and thousands of people showed up because he was giving away PlayStations or something.
That's the era we're in. We're in Twitch. Imagine if he had a message.
Exactly.
Imagine if he had a message.
So it showed young people that we do have power, and you can do it. You understand? Just put the right ingredients in it. The second thing that happened is the white company created an AI rapper.
Yeah,
How
he
many
was
people remember
He was
that?
Asian. They were Asian.
So what's going to happen politically now, Win, Jordan? What's going to happen politicking when AI takes over and we're not having this conversation, but they're having this conversation using our likeness and our voices and locking us right on out of the conversation?
I see the fist up. But
Yeah, we got one more
I know
we got one more
the fist
question.
is aimed for the power salute this time.
Yes, question in the back.
My name is Davon Love, Director of Public Policy, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle out of Baltimore City. So my question, if you can all reflect on the impact of the nonprofit industrial complex on advocacy, and I say that in reflections on a conversation I had a few years ago, I think it was Rosa Clemente, who talked about how during the Barack Obama election, and you think about prior to that when there was a heightened sense of anti-war, more radicalism on the ground in terms of politics, and that the Obama election essentially absorbed a bunch of the most radical elements back into the Democratic Party, back into the constellation of institutions that essentially co-opt our movements. So if you all can reflect, and then you think about some of the distance, the Farrakhan test, for instance, like the ways in which we're told to distance ourselves from certain iterations of black radicalism. Could you reflect on the impact of the nonprofit industrial complex on black social movements and maybe the role that hip hop has played either in forwarding that relationship or resisting that dynamic?
Yeah, that falls in my lap completely. So one, shout out to Rosa Clemente, who was at one time Chief of Staff, Hip Hop Caucus, so definitely want to shout her out, and her endeavors now in academia. So the nonprofit industrial complex is a serious component because it really digs into he who funds you is he who controls you. And so you have to be mindful of that. And if you don't have a partnership, obviously we need cash. There's the old saying, no cash, no cause. You need money to run what you're trying to do, your programs. The question that comes up there is that in the receiving of it, does that take away from your mission? Are you sent left when you should have went right? Can you still speak truth to power in that? And there's a lot of problems, I can tell you. One of the things I just want to shout out, the Hip Hop Caucus team, I mentioned it turns 19. If they could just maybe put their hand up, you can just see them around. Thank y'all. Give them a round of applause. One of the key things in that is that we, as those who are founders, we also need to figure out a way to grow our organizations and to move kind of out the way and allow in new genius. When it was 3 or 4 of us doing Hip Hop Caucus for many, many years, I will tell you, I know Dream Hampton now is one of our senior advisors at the Hip Hop Caucus, and we're actually thinking of, because of different situations, of how we can show the caucus and how we actually raise our resources. And one of the things there is that we didn't have much money. I mean, I don't think we didn't hit $1 million for our budget. I'm blessed now that we're now a multi-million-dollar nonprofit, and we're doing it. But it took 19 years, right? It took a long time to get there. The thing I think is the problem that you're asking is this. There are a lot of groups who do get absorbed as far as their political mission to try to continue their process. And I do think that we need to insulate organizations better. I know the Hip Hop Caucus, now that it took us 19 years, we are trying very hard to insulate new organizations, either through fiscal sponsorship, through literally doing their podcast for them, to providing them with straight resources, giving them money so they can not be on the wheel. And I would call out to other organizations to do more of that. On the screen behind me, for example, is I think you'll see LCV, it's in green, and that's the League of Conservation Voters. I'm on their board of directors, and I bring them up because you mentioned nonprofit industrial complex, and this is good for them. It's not a bad thing for them. When I came on the board, they were literally an organization that was, I believe, $700,000 in the hole. It's a predominantly white organization. But in that, I can't think of a black organization that could have even got to $700,000 in the hole, right? And so now, over the course of 15 years, they've been around for 50 years, but now at this point, they went from literally in the hole 700,000 to where their yearly budget is $140 million. There is no black organization that even comes close to that. So what I'm saying is that we do need to figure out not only not to be absorbed by foundations who are giving literally crumbs and sometimes go-away money to do things that don't fight for our people, but we do have to figure out how to create wealth so that we can support our institutions. Because what happens here is that if our organizations are forced to go to Coca-Cola, or they're forced to go to some corporation that doesn't have the same interests, and if they're in Atlanta, for instance, and that entity is funding Cop City, and then they're getting money, you then will see these same institutions become quiet. So we do need the ability for our people to get really serious about the other side of what it means to run a nonprofit in order to make sure that they're fiscally solvent and have those resources and that they have health care and they have a job they can go to. That's our next level, because the thing about it, we spend so much time only in the streets, but we got to be mindful of what's going on in the suites as well. And so I think that we have to become much more sophisticated. The one thing I will say earlier, I mentioned that the role of the artist, which is actually Tony K. Bombar's quote, the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. But in that, the difference, though, is that we don't need to be just revolutionary, we must be solutionary. And so I think that running nonprofits is as important as being out there in the streets. Politicking has to be solvent. This can't be the first annual and it ain't no more annual. It can't be, we have to figure out ways so that these are organizations that have been around for 5 and 6 or just 10 years, they have the infrastructure and resources to do these things and not be begging for foundations to give them crumbs to do whatever's bidding. But if we can support ourselves and we can ensure that our organizations are taken care of, then we can be we can have true movements and organizations fighting for liberation. That's the goal, and that's how we break the nonprofit industrial complex.
I think we have one more question right here, the young lady. Or,
yeah,
sorry,
gentleman.
Sorry. Oh, no. Oh, you were pointing to him. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And those will be our last.
Okay.
Introduce-
So
What's your name?
my name's Camille Paget.
All right.
I'm with Howard in the NAACP chapter here at Howard. My question is to Don Rashad, to speak to what you said, that we need more Black TV networks that are run by us, for us, and to push the Black narrative. How do we address the systemic pressures that prevent more polarizing, arguably positive narratives to gain more recognition of the negative narratives that take over the internet? To sort of give background to my question, I tend to listen to music that's a little less known. So a rapper that I listen to, a female rapper that I listen to, is named No Name. That's her
Love
name.
No Name.
I love No Name, but I notice she doesn't have as much recognition with the message that she puts out in comparison to somebody like Doja Cat. And I feel like that's very,
It's purposeful.
it's very purposeful. And so so my question is, how do we combat sort of issues like that, from hearing from somebody that's pushing positive narratives like No Name, but we more so hear about the negative in our community from rappers?
Yeah, we
such
do
as
it like
Doja Cat?
this. And I think also those rappers like No Name, Chica, Raspity, Tierra Whack need to get in a circle and do a round table and be real honest about that conversation. For someone who has been in it, who has been told to shut their mouth in it, right? It is difficult when you are trying to do what you do and they don't give you the platforms or the opportunities to do it. I'm telling you, you could be as big as you want. They will not put you on that stage if they don't feel like you have the message that they want. It is then in turn that we have to build the stage ourselves. And we have to invest in those artists. So one thing culturally that I challenge for our culture is, like you, when you look at and you listen to No Name and you get those streams, we build a community of people to then invest in No Name, to get on a stage and support and give No Name the money enough to be able to build it. Because sometimes culturally we say we support, but we're the one buying the Dojas, we're the one buying the things, and that disconnect is what's keeping No Name where No Name is, right? So I think, first of all, number one, having the conversation, getting all those incredible women who I'm a fan of as well. Sims is another one, Lil Sims. Incredible rappers that are just, again, stifled because of what their message is. And then the second thing is organizations, nonprofits, these big corporations and people that have money that are with our culture. We need to support them. The problem is our culture doesn't support these artists. They don't sign them. I mean, literally, most of the artists you know, they're managed by white people because Black people don't cultivate them because they don't think that they're sellable. It's the truth. I know this to be true. So we have to have Black labels who invest in Black artists, not white managers who have white. Come on, I'm just giving you truth. Most publicists are that are of artists like No Name or who are different in that world. You start talking about Kalila and those incredible artists. They're managed by white people. Their booking agents are white because the black community doesn't believe they can sell them. So we have to start believing in our culture, getting outside of our comfort zone, and even if we don't listen to it, if we understand the message of it, support it anyway. That's our problem. We can't be crabs in a barrel. We have to uplift one another. Even if we don't understand it, we need to see the analytics of something, see the beauty in something, and then say, this is worth investing in. So I would say the answer to that is us. Generation Z, millennials, we have to build it ourselves. We cannot look for others to do it. We need to build it, the radio stations, the TV stations, the labels. We need to build them ourselves and support it. That's the only way this gets handled.
Thank you, thank you. And for our final question,
Shout out to the young queen. That was a good question. Shout out to everybody who asked questions too. First, thank you to the panel for being here and dropping the gems. My name is Shola. I'm a CEO of a branding and design company called Sense. I have a question for the panel. Professor Griff will know more about it. So the 5 percenters, right? What is the status of the 5 percenters in relation to hip hop? And
Wait, repeat that again. What was the what?
the status of the 5 percenters?
The status?
Yeah. And should there be a resurgence of them, or like should it be a new wave, if that makes sense?
That's an interesting question. Oh, I can't talk about the status, but in early hip hop, we saw the heavy influence of spirituality and having a knowledge of self, and they laid a base, and basically a gateway, a doorway into coming into hip hop, having knowledge of self, and having a platform to do what they did. So the idea of all the other quote unquote religions or spiritual traditions, I'm not sure whether or not if they feared hip hop or they didn't want to make themselves known. It's rare early on in hip hop that you heard a Christian rapper. It wasn't safe for them because it was just too many street cats, too many 5 percenters from the 5% nation of gods and earths. It was too many Muslims. It was just too many other things going on that for some strange reason it was rare that you heard someone preaching or teaching Jesus on a song. You understand? The 5% nation of gods and earths came, that concept came out of the nation of Islam, and then the 5% nation came up out of the streets of New York. So they weren't afraid because that conversation was happening every day in every household, on every block, on every corner. So it was easy to put it in a song. Now I got to test the audience. Name me some hip hop groups that was 5 percenters. Our audience, I feel you, bro. I feel you, but I'm saying, I'm digging your hat and everything, but I'm saying, this is about people power. We got to have the conversation, so let us have the conversation. If we're going to reach young people, like these beautiful sisters here, then we have to know our history. If we're going to talk about what Dawn just talked about as far as being the managers and the PR people, why don't we know the history? Them other people know our history better than we know our history. Am I right or wrong? Okay, so then what was those early groups? Who are they? Talk to me, y'all. Some people in the back, at the back table. Did you have your hand up or you were just scratching your head? Okay, no, he was drinking something. Anyone? See, this is what I mean. We know Latifah, we know Poor Righteous Teachers, we know Lakim Shabazz, Son, we know Public Enemy, we know Big Daddy Kane, we know all these people was from the 5% nations of gods and earths, all right? But where is those organizations and where are those people and where's that information today among your peers? It's just not there.
We don't know it. We don't even identify to it because it's not taught. It's nowhere for us. No one's having. They don't.
Speak it to the mic, they need to hear that.
Saying we don't identify with it. Nobody tells us. Nobody teaches us that we are disconnected from that story. They're young. We don't identify to it. Right. And that's the disconnect.
So we have to understand, I'm sure you already know, these are some of the things that moved hip hop into a positive direction, which gave birth to other things. I gave the analogy of the throwing the rock in the pond, and you having a ripple effect. Said we have to, anything that we say today, and Wynn and Jordan, everything that we say today in this conference and the ones after this, everything that we say, we have to be mindful of what we say because it's going to affect 7 generations down the road. And every song, every time you put the pen to the pad, if we're mindful of that, trust me, the songs will change. If we start holding people accountable, you understand what I'm saying? It'll change because we have to force, it's not going to change on its own. You understand what I'm saying? Until we confront racism, until we stop letting things slide, especially in black music. Trust me, I supported India.Arie when she started talking about what happened at the Essence Festival. I didn't hear too many other artists because the bottom line was at stake. That the manager or the promoter wasn't signing the contract for them to perform anymore. But you mean I give less than a rat's ass. I'm just saying, if India.Arie was right, I'm going to support India.Arie. Does that kind of madness need to show up at the Essence Festival? No, not at all. Can you imagine we was in an uproar when, who was it, Justin Timberlake that ripped off Janet Jackson's pasty from Dunkin' Donuts or whatever she had over her. You understand what I'm saying? So if Janelle Monáe could come around and do it on her own and there's no uproar, then we validate it. Am I right or wrong? Young people are watching what we do, not what we say. They think that's cool and that's all right to do, and it's not all right to do. And someone needs to speak up and out about it. You see, no one signs Professor Griff's check. So I can say what I want to when I say it how I want to say it. You understand what I'm saying? And I invite them to come for me. It's a beautiful thing. Because then we can all learn from that particular conversation. Am I right or wrong? But if we too afraid to confront it, you know, I like that when I end my talks, I say the divinity in me salutes and celebrates the divinity in you. But it has to activate something in you also. Are you following what I'm saying? We need to start holding people accountable in black music, period. I know, Rev, you already do that. I know you have a wealth of knowledge where you could sit in the room and educate young women as far as artistry is concerned on what's going on in the music industry. Let me just say this one last thing. I'm married to a beautiful woman named Soleil. That woman left $1 million on the table. She had a deal for $1 million, 4 or 5, maybe 6 albums she had to do. She left that all on the table because she saw what was going on in the music industry and having conversations with me, her friend at that particular time, letting her know, look, this is what they're trying to mold you and shape you into. She could have been the next Little Kim or whatever. She was like, no, I don't want that for my life or my children. I says, well, either you're going to write and speak to that and make your songs about bucking that. That says the money might dry up for a minute, but nonetheless, we have to have integrity in this. Am I right or wrong? If we're not living in integrity, and we need to do some things, you live out your purpose on purpose. So she says, you know something, to hell with the money, I'm going to take this spiritual path, and I'm going to educate young black women.